Welcome to USA Global TV and Radio, where our mission is to provide education, entertainment, hope, and inspiration. USA Global TV and Radio connects you with experts and audiences all around the world every single day to help you succeed in business and to live a richer life. Visit us at usaglobaltv.com to learn about career and life-changing training and mentoring programs like the Listening Mentor. Subscribe to our newsletter to stay informed about our special programs and offers. Discover how you can become a guest on one of our shows or a host or producer of a USA Global TV and Radio show of your very own. That's USA Global TV and Radio, where the doctor is always in.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and hello to all of our followers around the world. This is USA Global TV and Radio. I'm Dr. JACALYN KERBECK, and I am so excited to have you here for our show today, which is The Wise Ones. This is a show where we celebrate people and their accomplishments, and we bring education, information, hope, and inspiration. The star of our show is backstage, and if you are watching any of our programming, you know Thursdays are red.olaughlin days because Red has at least 3, and on the first of the month, 4 shows that he does here on our platform. Red, come on out. Hello.
Howdy, y'all. All y'all.
It's good to see you again after Food and Our Emotions, Red.
Yeah, it was. I thought it was a very good show. I mean, we have cravings, but we never really understand what causes them. I think we did a really good job today of at least clarifying and providing awareness and maybe a little bit of education on that. So I thought that was a good show this morning.
I did too. And I think also it's interesting. We have cravings that are unrelated to food as well. We have cravings to do things, be things, and we may or may not understand why we have them and what it is that drives us. So I think our guest backstage is going to be able to help us with that. But for people who have not met you before, I want to thank you for doing World Jenny's Day, our marathon, where we were celebrating mental health, wealth, and entertainers from around the world just the other day. But Red, share with us, when you're not on this platform, what are some of the other things that you do besides being a publisher, being an Amazon #1 author, besides your service to our country as a veteran, and also being a distinguished Toastmaster? There's so much more.
Well, my primary passion is researching the human body at the cellular level, chemically speaking. I look for cause and effect relationships. Treat a cause, fix a problem. Treat symptoms, and you'll always be treating symptoms. So when you look at a chemical reaction going on, sometimes you can speed up that chemical reaction. Sometimes you can slow it down. Sometimes you can stop it. So depending on what that reaction is, there are things that you can do. So my focus is on longevity, age-related issues. So if I can slow down some of those age-related issues, then that's what I want to pass on to people. But if there are things that speed up that process, I try to make those aware. I try to provide those in an awareness mode so that people can stop doing something that they thought they were not at risk for. But there's just so many things going on. And to me, I fell in love with chemistry long before I met my wife of 55 years. Sophomore in high school, took a chemistry class, and that was it. I made my mind right then and there. That was my major, got my degree, and immediately got an invitation to Vietnam. So my life changed a little bit. Spent 31 years in the military, mostly in the reserves, but got a chance to visit 61 countries in the world. And nowadays I'm pretty much retired, but I write a lot. I got almost 1,000 original content articles on LinkedIn. I speak a lot. I help new authors with their books. I've helped Dr. JACALYN with hers. And I'm a publisher. And thanks to USA Global TV and Radio Network and the E360 TV network, I'm a broadcast TV host, and I appreciate the opportunity there, Dr. JACALYN.
Thank you so much, Red. And thanks for all of your friendship and your mentorship as well. So I know you are always out there networking, making new connections, which many people have trouble doing. They feel insecure, but you're great at it. And you brought somebody fabulous to the platform. Tell us about our guest today.
Well, it's interesting because I try to get guests for this show, and I put out two and a half dozen invites over the last a couple, 3 weeks, and was not getting as the responsiveness I was hoping for. However, I go on to LinkedIn, or I go into a Happy Neighborhood Project, or a couple other places that I go to network, and I meet people and get a chance to take a look at them. I came across Maribeth, and it said, she was an author. Okay, that's good. And speaker, that's even better. But when I look at the speaking end of things, I expect, if you're a public speaker, that you're probably at least at that motivational level. That seems to be the ground floor. Then you get to the inspirational level where people can't stop talking about you, that you have a lot of positive results. And we've had several inspirational speakers on the program over time. We've had a lot of authors. I mean, just buku authors. But I met Maribeth online through LinkedIn. We communicated back and forth, got a chance to kind of know each other. Says, yeah, this would be a perfect candidate for a guest on The Wise One. So I asked her, she said yes, and here we are. And Maribeth, please join us.
Thank you. Thank you for that great introduction, Red. Thank you, Dr. JACALYN, for having me.
Welcome, Maribeth. It's so nice to have you here today. And so for people who are listening to the program, it's Maribeth Ditmars, and her website is her name, which we'll take a look at in a moment. So you are an author and a speaker, but you really stand out from others because of your faith-based approach. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yes. I have actually lived every mother's worst nightmare, not once, but twice. In 2001, we lost our 14-year-old son, Christopher, to leukemia. In 2015, we lost his brother in an accident. So I had, when you go through something like that, you either run from God or you depend on him. And I have chosen the latter. And, I didn't set out to write a book. My first book actually began as a journal when we had to take our son Christopher to the hospital for all those chemo admissions. I had to write down copious notes, names of doctors, names of drugs, his protocol, and I put it all in a notebook. And then that notebook eventually evolved into a narrative. And that became my first book, which has won an iUniverse Star Award. And that book is called Christopher's Journey. But as the notes turned into a narrative, something amazing happened with my son, Chris, is as his body grew weaker, his spirit became stronger. And we witnessed a supernatural healing of his spirit while his body was fighting the cancer. And he had remission for 2 years. Those were 2 fabulous years. Have you all seen the movie The Bucket List?
Yes.
Well, we did the pediatric version of that. He wanted to go snowboarding out west because we live in Florida. We did that. He wanted us to sneak him into a casino so he could play the slots. We did that. He wanted to go down to the Keys. So, and I write all about this in my first book. And so it's not maudlin. We had a tremendous amount of fun. But then the cancer returned. And almost 4 years to the day that he was diagnosed, he relapsed. And he didn't last long after his last relapse. But he spoke to us on his deathbed with one eye in heaven. Now, I have to say, at the time, I wasn't what you would call a strong believer. I was raised in a very traditional church. I went to church on Sunday, but then I forgot about all that and went to the beach. Well, this all changed when our Christopher literally witnessed to us on his deathbed. And he said, Mom and Dad, Jesus is going to come for me. And I want you to know that I'm going to be okay. And he even joked around a little because there were some school books sitting on the shelf and he looked at them and he goes, not going to need them where I'm going. But his winsomeness, his lack of fear rocked my world because I knew it didn't come from me. And what I believe happened was that God answered our prayers, but not in the way that we wanted him to. We kept praying, heal our son, heal our son, heal our son. Instead, he said, I've got him ready for the next life. And he left with a sparkle in his eye. And he even sent us a little miracle after he passed, 3 days after he passed. Would you like to hear that story?
Absolutely.
Well, when we knew, we brought him home to hospice and we knew he was declining, my husband, Rob, said, Chris, buddy, is there some way you can let us know that you made it to heaven okay? And Chris was like, well, Dad, what'd you have in mind? I mean, I'm going to be new in heaven. And it was a very tender moment because it was almost like a role reversal. It was like he became the parent and he was guiding us and we were the children. And it's interesting because people who work in hospice will say that. They'll say, let the dying soul be your guide. And that's what Chris did. And he says, I'm going to ask, but I'm going to be new. I'll let you know. We'll see. Just like that famous line, parents tell kids, we'll see. Well, Rob said, Chris, could you leave a feather under my pillow? And 3 days after his passing, we woke up and not only was there a feather under Rob's pillow, but our entire bed was covered in feathers. Covered. Little white feathers. Now, we don't have a down comforter, so there wasn't a physical explanation. We did have a down pillow, but it was all puffy, and there was no way it could have produced that amount without becoming flattened. So it was a real honest-to-goodness miracle that he sent that sweet, sweet message. And I believe God does allow miracles. I don't think they're all reserved for the biblical days. And you know what's interesting? And I said I wasn't much of a Christian then. Shortly after that happened, a friend sent me Psalm 91:4, which says he will cover you with his feathers. Under his wings you will find refuge. His faithfulness will be your shield and your rampart. Well, this person just mailed me this verse. And it, it rocked my world because I'm like, oh my gosh, the Lord's telling my family that he's got us covered. So, so that was Chris. But during that time, I'd like to tell you, I went out and told the world that my son's in heaven and everybody shouldn't grieve. That's not what happened. In reality, I had become an alcoholic and it had snuck up on me. During his 4 years of treatment in the hospital, I carried a very large purse. And in that purse, I had my plastic bottle of Popov. I liked it because it was plastic. So you could sneak it into the hospital and it didn't clunk, when you put it down on the floor. And I could go to the vending machine and get a Coke and pour half of it out. And, by the time I drank that Coke, the whole thing was vodka. And that's how I got through those 4 years. And I realized that after Chris stepped into eternity, that I should stop. And I found out, much to my chagrin, I couldn't. I could not. And one day I was driving to school. I was a 4th grade teacher at the time. And I was already battling in my mind, oh, I'm not going to drink today. Well, maybe I'll have 1. Well, maybe I'll have 3. 3's ladylike. That's what I told myself. It's kind of like 3 wishes, 3 nights, or in my case, 3 blind mice, right? So what happened was Chris had modeled a surrender experience for me. And he had surrendered his disease of cancer. And I joined a 12-step program. And that's one of the things I say, that's the 3rd step, is you make a decision to surrender your life and your will to God as you understand him. And I realized that Chris had modeled that for me, and he had surrendered his cancer, whereas I had to surrender my addiction. And Red, you were talking about craving. And and I learned about the phenomenon of craving, where, the brain of an addict and an alcoholic processes these substances differently. And I had to have a spiritual, cellular level experience by surrendering and letting the Holy Spirit make those changes in my brain. So I'm happy to say that December of this year, I'm going to celebrate 20 years of recovery. And I've had the high honor and privilege of mentoring other women, of speaking in different venues about my recovery. That wasn't the end of our struggles. And, you can interrupt me and ask me any questions you want, or I'll just keep talking. I'm really good at talking. But after I became sober, we discussed our daughter, who was a young adult at the time. She lost her job and she moved back in with us and brought our granddaughter with her. Well, we soon discovered that she was using drugs. And I believe that was also a divine intervention, because the Lord put her and our granddaughter in a sober household. And I had to practice some tough love. And this is one of the things I've spoken about too, is, what do you do when you have an addict in the family? How do you, kick them out when you're afraid they're going to die and all that? But we had to practice tough love. And we told our daughter, "You're leaving." And we told our granddaughter, who was 6 at the time, "You're staying." But we didn't just eject her into the world without resources. I happened to have, at the time I was teaching a class in a local rehab, and I hooked her right up, and she went and she got the help that she needed. So that was another struggle we went through, and our daughter's doing really well right now. And so our lives went on. And I felt like I had a family again, because our granddaughter stayed with us for almost 5 years, because when our daughter got sober, she wasn't ready to be a parent again. So we kind of co-parented. And as our daughter healed, we gradually released responsibility back to her for our granddaughter. And the very week that we gave full custody back is the week I retired from full-time teaching with visions of helping my husband in his business. And that same week, our 21-year-old son, Jared, was killed in an accident. He was an avid fisherman, and he died in a water accident. He was free diving, and the weather was rough. The conditions were terrible. We'd asked him not to go. So once again, I lived every mother's worst nightmare. Only this time there wasn't the closure that we had with Christopher. This time, our healthy, active, funny, vibrant 21-year-old son was here one day and gone the next. So my husband went into a terrible depression. He couldn't work. I had just retired, and I thought I was going to help him run his business. So then we experienced financial loss on top of that. And, in some of my faith-based presentations, I talk about Job, because he was a righteous man, but he also lost everything. He lost 10 children. He lost property. He lost his herd, which in those days, that was your wealth. Your wealth was measured in cattle and goats and sheep, He lost all of that. And I tell people, it's okay to grieve. Some people, especially Christians, they're afraid to be mad at God. They think, oh, I shouldn't be mad at God. I shouldn't be shaking my fist at him. Why did you take my child? I should just be accepting it. But, it's not biblical not to grieve. In Job, he's actually suicidal. There's one verse in Job 3. I'll read this real quick. It says, "For sighing has become my daily food. My groans pour out like water. What I feared has come upon me. I have no peace, no quietness. I have no rest, but only turmoil. So, and in this country, people don't want to talk about child loss. They don't like talking about loss, period, you know. And at my age, you know, I have friends who've lost spouses who are widows, but it's almost like a taboo subject talking about loss, particularly unnatural loss, like childhood or a young spouse. So one of the things I do when I share my story and when I speak is I give biblical biblical examples of where God says, yeah, you got to grieve. In Lamentations 2:11, my eyes fail from weeping. I am in torment within. My heart is poured out on the ground because my people are destroyed. So I have this, so all of this biblical study and finding my way and my path and figuring out where I go in the scope of eternity, all this was going on in the years between the time I lost Chris. We lost him in 2001 and we lost Jared in 2015. And by the time we lost Jared, I wasn't the same person. I hadn't had a drink at that time in 14 years. And I was very involved in helping others with addiction and with grief.
Well, let me ask you a question there, Mary Beth, because you were was it elementary school or?
I was a 4th grade teacher.
Okay. Teaching is one thing because you usually have prepared notes and you know your audience and you get the response back. But from a motivational or inspirational speaking experience, where did you develop the ability to provide some kind of inspiration, guidance, whatever it may happen to be, closure to the audiences? Obviously you're a very polished speaker right now. How did you develop your speaking ability?
Well, having a background in education does help because we're communicators and we're good at boiling things down. I mean, if you can teach someone how to do long division, you can pretty much explain anything, right? But people started asking me, how do you do it? I would share at my church, I would share at recovery meetings, and I would tell the story I told you about Chris, and I would tell them, you know, that I know I'm going to see him again. And people they just started asking me, how do you do it? How do you get out of bed in the morning? And I realized that I had gone through a process and I wrote that process down and I developed a signature presentation. And I call it 4 R's for renewing your mind, which you can find on my website. And the first R is reach in. And that's what I just spoke about a minute ago, reaching in and acknowledging your grief or your brokenness. You know, if you've had a loss, that's your grief. If you're struggling with addiction, if you're struggling with pornography or whatever your struggle is, you can't bury it. So that's the reach in. It's the honesty step.
Okay, but somebody who's grieving, their grief is almost totally isolated from the outside world.
Right.
And there's a transition from just a focused, very narrow focus on what happened. And it takes a lot to transition.
Oh, it does. It takes
deep level
time.
of grief to even just a moderate level of grief. So,
Yeah.
you know, listening to somebody doesn't change that. You
Right.
know, listening to a real live, you know, person who had something happen worse than you do. I mean, but that grieving process does improve, for lack of a better word, improve, ameliorate, reduces a little bit on the intensity over time. But how do you really and truly, when we're talking to an individual or even a small group, how do you really and truly address that transition of super deep grief into being able just to focus on life again.
Yeah, to integrate it into functioning. Well, my second R is reaching out, and I have resources because we have to connect with someone other than ourselves. And my third R is routine. We have to change our lifestyle. We have to develop routines of mind, body, and spirit. And then my fourth R is relying on God. So when I do presentations, I have, handouts and I have materials that go with each of these. But, to answer the first part of your question, when somebody's really, really deep in it and they're brand new, the greatest thing anyone can do is just listen to them. Because what happens is when you lose someone, everybody comes with the casseroles and the babysitting, and then 2 weeks later, they're all gone. And that's when the isolation really starts. And one of the greatest gifts that people gave me and still give me is they let me talk about my children and my struggles. So that's the beginning part. But when I actually do workshops and trainings, I offer this process that I call a 4R process. And, I tell the story of how somebody reached out to me. There's a gentleman who was in the Twin Towers when they fell. His name's Bill Lavin. And you might want to interview him because he's got a really cool organization. He runs the Where Angels Play Foundation. And what they do is they build playgrounds in memory of children who have passed. And his nonprofit built 26 playgrounds in honor of the Sandy Hook victims. So we're connected in spirit with all of them. And he contacted me because he had read Christopher's journey and said, can we build a playground for your boys in Sarasota, Florida? So there's that connection, that reaching out. Sometimes the grieving person reaches out to a support group, but sometimes the support reaches out to the grieving person. And it was an amazing experience. They let my grandkids be honorary construction supervisors and get in the little teeny tiny backhoe and dig the first pile of dirt. And it's a beautiful playground. It's right on the beach. And it's a much better place to go there than to go to, a graveyard. So go ahead.
How long did it take you to write the first book on Christopher?
Maybe 7 months, 8 months.
Because you had it documented?
Pardon me?
Because you had it so well documented?
Yes, it would have taken longer. I had journals. Well, my joke is any drunk can write a book, but you got to get sober to get it published. And that's what happened. I'd sit at night drinking and typing, and but it wasn't. Nothing happened with it until I became, a woman in sobriety.
Mary Beth and Red, sorry, I just want to interject. We have one of our team members who's watching and commenting, and I always appreciate that. We've got Heather Joy, who is our producer here in addition to me. Heather, thanks for watching. And she writes, oh gosh, I can't imagine that pain. And then also, wow, that story brought a smile to my heart. And most recently, routine is my favorite important R.
I every morning I walk 2 or 3 miles. And my favorite routine is my Philippians 4:6 power walk. And Philippians 4:6 says to use prayer, petition, and thanksgiving. So I power walk and I pray and then petition, asking, and then I finish with thanksgiving. And what happens is when you practice gratitude, it creates new neural pathways in your brain and it gives you a better outlook. So routines are everything. Matter of fact, when people subscribe to my website, I have this calendar where they have routines for mind, body, and spirit, and they can, use it to see how they're doing each week. But
Tell me about your other two books.
okay, well, my second book was for children with cancer. It's called The Bald-Headed Princess, Cancer, Chemo, and Courage. And that came about because I realized anyone who has a child with cancer isn't going to want to read Christopher's Journey because it doesn't have a happy ending. Even though there's a lot of humor in the book, they're not going to want to touch that. Plus, it doesn't explain, it's written for adults. And shortly after Chris passed, I had a 4th grade student in my class who was battling cancer. And he didn't have any literature. So that's what that book is for. And I know right now the copies are limited. So if you're not able to get one and you want to reach out to me, I can arrange for you to receive it. But it is written at a 4th grade level. And it explains cancer. It explains what chemotherapy is. It explains why people go bald when they're on treatment. And it also has bullying in it that's dealt with because the main character gets teased when she goes bald. And these are all things that the children who deal with cancer have to deal with. I wrote it out of a need. And then my last book is my faith-based book. So I've written 3 books. And my 3rd book is called, there's our first book, Christopher's Journey. And then my 3rd book is called Dancing in the Minefields, One Woman's Faith Journey Through Child Loss, Addiction, and Adversity. And this book explains my faith journey. And I talk about each of my children in the book. You know, Jared, the 21-year-old we lost, even though he wasn't telling us he was going to heaven like Chris was, because Jared, died suddenly, we were able to see a transformation in his life because he went through a period of great rebellion and we actually saw him change. And, so I write about that because I know my Jared had faith, even though we lost him suddenly. And I think this book, my most recent book, I want to offer hope to people that just feel beaten down. Man, I've lost everything. The God has taken care of us. After my husband became depressed, we lost around the same time, we lost a business in the recession, and we lost our life savings, and we had to sell everything. We had a beautiful home in Florida, a 4-bedroom home with a pool. We had a boat. Man, you could feel the breeze coming off the water when the repo man snatched that boat back up. We had to get rid of everything and start over, and I had to do kind of a soul cleansing. So what we did is we lived in an RV for 2 years. We went from 2,100 square feet to about 300 square feet. But it was a really sweet time of healing because we went to the mountains and I spent a lot of time in the forest, and that's part of my routine to this day is spending time outside. So, I want to offer hope to people that have had different kinds of loss. I want to tell them that God is faithful if they search for him.
Is there a 4th book on the horizon?
Well, I might have to talk to you about that, Red, because you said you publish. I was thinking of turning my 4 R's into a book. 4 R's for renewing your mind. So yeah, I'm thinking about it. Because I think
a great idea.
Yeah.
Maribeth, are you available for speaking engagements?
Oh, absolutely. I love speaking. And I can do keynotes, I can do workshops, women's luncheons. I work with most budgets. All anyone has to do is fill out the contact form. I'm also part of a speaker bureau called Christian Women Speakers, and it is on womenspeakers.com, and I'm in that speaker bureau. And if you find me there, You can see a list of some of the talks that I do, and you can, read testimonials, the people that have heard me speak. And I have some on my website as well.
Okay, so your website for people to contact you or to get more information is Maribeth Ditmars .com. So it's Maribeth with an Maribeth, all one word, Ditmars, Ditmars. So all one word, Maribeth Ditmars.
Yep, Ditmars. I tell them DIT Planet Mars.
Okay.
So, yep, all they got to do is fill that out, and they can ask me questions or, tell me about an upcoming event that they have. And I just love doing it. I think that's how God's using my brokenness. And
Maribeth, are you open to travel, or is it in the local
Oh,
area?
yes. Yeah, I'm open to travel. Mm-hmm.
Fantastic.
Absolutely.
Okay. And I'd love for you to share about your tagline. I think this is so powerful.
Well, my tagline is all about having an eternal perspective. Because, we're in the middle of fighting spiritual battles every day of our lives. I mean, look what's happening in Israel right now. And you have the alcoholic or the addict who wants to reach for that drink or that drug, or you have the parent who's struggling with a difficult child, and they're tempted to do the wrong thing, and they're tempted to think this life is just the pits. And my tagline, laughter and tears are only a moment apart, but joy is eternal, is a reminder that even though it looks like we're losing the battle, God has already won the war. For Christians, we know that Jesus already paid all our bills. We know his sacrifice has ensured us front row seating in heaven. And, I did this one presentation one time where I was talking about how long eternity is. And I had a slide with a timeline. And the timeline, filled up the whole screen. And it had like prehistoric eras and dinosaurs. And then maybe this little itty bitty part on the timeline was the modern age in that big long line. And then another like little tiny dot in the modern age is my life. Well, if you take that whole timeline, that's just a dot in eternity. It's mind-blowing to think about it. But if we keep an eternal perspective and we ask God to give us a purpose in our loss, he will. Can I tell you about, I don't know how I'm doing on time, but can I tell you about a gentleman I met when Where Angels Play Foundation was building our playground in Sarasota?
Can you wrap it up within a minute or so?
Yeah, his name was Maurice. He's from Rwanda, and the organization built a playground in Rwanda. And he told us that he lost almost all his family in the genocide, the tribal genocide. And he told us about how he has forgiven them and how he has found a new purpose. He not only helps build the playgrounds, but he sells items to fundraise for people who have been victims to have plastic reconstructive surgery. Mm-hmm. How's that for a purpose out of loss, huh?
Yeah.
Man. So that's laughter and tears are only a moment apart, but joy is eternal. Someday in heaven, he's going to be high-fiving all these people that have been forgiven. It's awesome.
Okay, so you want to send people to your website, Maribeth Ditmars, and they can contact you there.
Yes.
And just go with the flow.
Absolutely. I would be honored to encourage any kind of gathering that needs encouraging. And with my teaching background, I do my homework. So, depending on the needs of the audience, I will adapt.
Okay.
Maribeth, it's been an absolute pleasure meeting you, and you would be a great fit for a number of shows that we have. So please do come back, and we can really start to dig into a lot of what you shared, and the transparency that you've brought today and the absolute realness is it's truly appreciated, because I can imagine it's not easy to go through what happened to you and to two people you love so much. So thank you again for your courage.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for inviting me to be on.
Yes. Thank you. We'll see you again on one of our other shows.
Okay. Sounds like a plan.
All right. Thanks
Bye-bye.
again. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Mary Beth.
You know, Red, what I'm really reflecting on as Mary Beth shared her story is that we all suffer a loss in some way, but it's the losing of two children. I can't even imagine. I mean, and it stays with you for your whole life, I would think. So what I'm taking away from it is that Mary Beth has been able to rebuild her life in a different way and to help others through the pain and yet the growth that she's had through her faith.
Mm-hmm. There are many ways to go, and most of them are not up. So
very true. Very true. Well, thank you for bringing Mary Beth to the program today. Red, your show, not your next show, is coming up right after this, Talking Heads. Tell us a little bit about what you'll be discussing on your new topic for this week.
Well, I decided to go in the area of wellness, hot topics, and trends. And I started looking just in general at what's going on right now. I said, well, let me go back and what happened a few years ago. Well, what happened 20 years ago? What was going on prior to that? And is a trend that started still in existence now, or did it just fade by the wayside? If I was to say, Dr. JACALYN, there's a current trend right now where people are putting tape across their mouth when they go to bed at night so they can concentrate more on breathing through their nose. You'd say, that sounds silly. But it is a topic. It is a trend. And what I'm doing in the next several weeks is looking at what are the current 2022, 2023, 2024, what's going on in the wellness industry, not necessarily health. We spend a lot of time on health and nutrition and fitness. Wellness is a slightly different bent on the same general health part of our life. But we'll talk about wellness, and then we'll talk about what are some of the things going on now that is a little different than 10 years ago, that didn't exist 10 years ago, or something that's growing exponentially that didn't really get off the ground 2 years ago. And we'll have a chance over the next several weeks to dive deeper into some of these. But that's the plan, is to talk about what is wellness and what are the hot topics today and what are the trends for the future.
Excellent. I look forward to it. And I'd just like to let people know that in addition to being able to watch Talking Heads today at your regular scheduled time, which is 3 p.m. Eastern time, 8 p.m. British Summer Time, that they will be able to watch this again next week on E360 TV, our partner. So thank you so much, Red.
And beyond that, I got about 18 minutes before I need to get to the next studio and get all set up. So I'm going to, I guess, turn it back over to you, Dr. JACALYN, and let you pretend like you know what you're doing.
Thank you, Red. All right, just some quick announcements I'd like to share with people. We have somebody who actually found us on Google, joined us last year in January for our reunion show, which is open to all of our guests. It's 15 minutes where you get to promote yourself and meet people on our team, meet new people. Mr. Joseph Stetter now has his own show that is piloting this evening. He is the Resume Whisperer, and he is going to share his tips to help people find that perfect job, in addition to how to write the resume, and a number of really interesting stories that he can share about what he's seen and how he's helped people. So join us tonight. That's at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 1 a.m. British Summer Time. Also, one of our team members, Zane Carson Caruth, will be at Neiman Marcus in Houston this Saturday, October the 14th, from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. She is going to be signing her books, World's First Tooth Fairy Ever, in conjunction with the Books to Bed project where you can get pajamas and a book set. So if you're available in the Houston area, please stop by and see Zane, meet her. If not, you can email rsvphouston@neimanmarcus.com. And finally, I will be in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, in the US of A next week for the World Summit on Women and Girls, which is an initiative of the Justina Mutali Foundation, Hands Across Philadelphia. If you'll be in the area, please do come by. You can get your tickets for the conference over at the Justina Mutali Foundation. It's also on Eventbrite. All right, we will be closing out with a sponsorship from the British School of Excellence. So thank you so much to everyone for watching, and thank you for following, for subscribing. We just hit over 1 million views the other day, so we couldn't be any more grateful for all of you out there who are supporting our work. Thank you again. Here's the British School of Excellence. This program is brought to you in part by the British School of Excellence and founder, Mr. Philip Sykes. Building confidence, changing lives. Do you share our view that etiquette is a set of modern life skills that are essential for personal and professional success? Join us as an etiquette coach and change people's lives through the power of etiquette and manners.
The last few days have been really amazing. I had a trainer course from the British School of Etiquette.
And I must say it's been one of the best decisions I've ever made and one of the best investments I've made in my own training and development.
Now, words alone will not describe the transformation and the positive path that I have traveled with the British School of Etiquette.
I find really I learned a lot from the lessons this time I came.
The last few days with the British School of Etiquette have been fantastic.
And what I've learned now is really beyond my expectations.
This is the most rewarding experience and the best investment I have made this year.
It was just great. I learned so much, and when I go back to Belgium I will incorporate a lot of it into my day-to-day life and business.
It's been absolutely wonderful for the whole week that we were here.
I feel transformed, and I feel like blowing a trumpet and tell people, come and do this school, this class is the best, this is the best school ever.
You should take it. It will change your life immediately.
I am now able to teach other people how to bring the best of them.
Thank you.
Thank you, BSD.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you to our clients for their testimonials on the Train the Trainer program. Our exponential and global growth is so significant that we've evolved from the British School of Etiquette to the British School of Excellence, where we're investors in people. Let us invest in you and your career. Contact us to become an etiquette coach. Go to thebritishschoolofexcellence.com. Start your career and elevate your success today.